from Matthew chapter 2, beginning at verse number 1. I'm going to stop reading at verse number 12. It reads like this from the English Standard Version. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet." Perhaps they were going to Micah's prophet, where he says, "O you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, you are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, so that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. This is the word of the Lord for the people of the Lord, and we say praise be to our Lord. On this morning, I would like to title our sermon from this passage. I would like to title it, This Christmas, This Christmas. I've used two Christmas song titles these past two Sundays. Hopefully I can keep it up for next Sunday. The other day, after at our home, we had finished trimming the tree at our home. For nostalgia's sake, I decided to turn on the Charlie Brown Christmas episode to watch with the family together. Anybody else Charlie Brown Christmas fan? Okay, good. All right, I got two people in the house. In case you don't remember how it begins, or you don't even know how it begins, the first line spoken in the opening scene of this episode, the Charlie Brown Christmas, it's Charlie Brown's words, and he turns to his blanket-carrying, thumb-sucking best friend Linus, and he says this: "I think there must be something wrong with me, Linus. Christmas is coming, but I'm not happy. I don't feel the way I'm supposed to feel." And this Christmas, y'all, in what has been one pandemic of a year, I think Charlie Brown captures the essence of how many of us are feeling as we approach and get close to this Christmas. Yes, we may have the Christmas carols playing in the background, and we may have finished decorating our trees and our homes. We may have mailed out our Christmas cards that many of you have been sending, and I've received them. Thank you. You may have even finished buying your presents, and you have your presents wrapped underneath the Christmas tree already. But for this Christmas, something still seems to be missing. In a year filled with such grief and loss and turmoil and tragedy, unrest and uncertainty, for many of us, this Christmas isn't feeling so Christmassy after all. But I want you to listen to how Charlie Brown goes on to say after he opens up with his opening lines. He says, "I just don't understand Christmas, I guess. I like getting presents and I like sending Christmas cards and decorating trees and all that good stuff, but I'm still not happy." And I love what Linus says back to Charlie Brown after he says that. Linus looks at Charlie Brown and he says, "Well, maybe Lucy's right. Of all the Charlie Browns in the world, you're the Charlie Browniest." But perhaps Charlie Brown's line is the real dilemma of this Christmas. Perhaps we just don't understand Christmas. Or perhaps we do understand Christmas, but we've become so preoccupied with the dressings and the trimmings of Christmas, all those things that we think that we need to have in order for Christmas to feel like Christmas and for it to be bright, that perhaps all of that stuff has created a Christmas where this Christmas, because we don't have all those things, it doesn't feel as bright as it once was for us. In fact, we're all probably just a tad bit guilty of allowing the commercialism and the consumerism of Christmas to overshadow Christ in Christmas. I'm sure some of you probably saw the video of the Christmas tree that went up at Rockefeller Plaza this year in New York City. If you did not see it, when they put the Christmas tree up, it seemed to capture the sentiment of this Christmas, as many of its branches were sparse and they were noticeably crooked and drooping. The Christmas tree at Rockefeller Plaza, yes, it showed us what this Christmas is feeling like. And in fact, many people went online and they compared the sparse tree, the drooping tree, to the tree from the Charlie Brown Christmas episode. But as we approach this Christmas, because of the loss of close loved ones this year, the exhaustion of being quarantined in our homes for so long with what seems like no end in sight. The fact that we're not going to be able to spend Christmas with our loved ones in the normal way that we would. It seems that for this Christmas, even with the news of a vaccine beginning to be rolled out, y'all aren't even looking forward to that vaccine. And because for this Christmas, there doesn't seem to be much to look forward to. But even as tough as this year has been, I believe that even with this Christmas, we have something to look forward to. In fact, that's what drew me to our passage this morning, was captured here by Matthew almost in a way where he's trying to capture lightning in a bottle. What's happening here is that on the one hand, we see the bubbly excitement surrounding the first Christmas. But on the other hand, it is contrasted against the dilemma of the first Christmas as well. And perhaps you've heard it said before in regards to this passage, but the tension found in this passage urges all of us to ask this eternal, internal question. How will we respond to the good news of the birth of Jesus? How will we respond to the news that the Christ has been born? See, what this passage provides for us, it isn't so much lessons from Christmas, but it provides for us the remedy for the malaise we can feel and even feel this year, particularly during the time of Christmas. And the remedy, even for this Christmas, is being reminded of the good news that Jesus Christ is born. That's the remedy. I know that may not be what you want to hear this morning, but the remedy for our malaise is the fact that Christ was born. And that is good news. For indeed, the Savior's birth is a special birth. For indeed, to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. But some of us are still asking whether there is anything to look forward to this Christmas. But as you ask that, this passage this morning, it comes to us to remind us that indeed, even this Christmas, can be a very special Christmas for you and for me. And that even this Christmas, we have something to look forward to, something that will raise our spirits and something that would help us know the joy not only of this holiday, but what joy this holiday brings to every season of life and to every day of life, every day of the year. By putting this account on record, Matthew, he wants us to catch the sense of excitement surrounding the birth of Jesus, and he wants it to be an example for us. He wants the spark of this very first Christmas to ignite us every Christmas, to join in the rejoicing and the worshiping and the gift giving of this first Christmas. I wonder, can you sense it? Can you feel in the text as Matthew is trying to catch lightning in a bottle, the lightning of this scene, and he's trying to bottle it up, and he's trying to bring it to every Christmas door, every home that has a Christmas wreath on it. He's trying to bring it to every door. This sense of excitement and anticipation. Listen to the text. These wise men, also known as magi. We get the word magic from this word magi. They show up in Jerusalem and they are excited, y'all. They're exuberant. They are giddy because they come asking, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? Can you sense? Can you feel? Can you hear? Can you touch and taste and smell their excitement? They say, listen, we were far east, but we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. Y'all, they can barely contain their excitement, and they are very direct with what they have come to do. They've come to worship the newborn king. They saw the star, and they're like, now we are here. It took us a long time to get here, but guess what? We came to worship this king. Where is he? Some say that he showed up at King Herod's palace first, but we don't know that. That's not what the text says. I can imagine they're going throughout Jerusalem asking, where is the king? Where is the newborn king? Where is he? They are excited, y'all. And they've come to worship this king. These astrology studying wise men from the east, who had probably traveled a great distance to get to Jerusalem. They have come all the way there to worship the newborn king. These wise men who didn't even know where to look for the king. They come searching, excited to worship this newborn king. They show up in Jerusalem because they know that this is where the king would live. But they show up in Jerusalem when Jesus had actually been born in Bethlehem. Here it is that they had sense enough to be wise enough to know that the proper response to this king being born was to go and find him and to worship him. Listen, even if they didn't go to the right place, they had sense enough that when they found out that this king had been born, that they would go and that they would find out where he is, because they knew that the proper response, the sensible, wise thing to do, was to go find Jesus and worship him. And I know it may sound corny, but it is still true that wise men worship. See, many don't understand why Matthew included this account of these astrology studying men who probably dabbled in magic as well, and maybe even dabbled in sorcery. Who knows? But what we find out is that because as men who studied astrology and dabbled in magic, they were not the type of people that would have been celebrated and praised and that Christians would have included unless it actually happened. But by including this account, Matthew, he's not necessarily commending how they found out about Jesus' birth, but he was commending their response to the news of Jesus' birth. See, even though how they found out about the birth may not have been what many would have been comfortable with. The fact that they responded the way that they did, going to search for this newborn king in order to worship him. This is why Matthew is lifting this up for us. He wants us to know that wise men worship. Wise men go searching for Jesus, and they aren't too proud to worship. They're not too arrogant to worship. They too can worship. Wise men do worship, and there is nothing soft about men worshiping God. Because wise men know that Jesus is worthy of us looking out for. Wise men know that Jesus is worth our time. Wise men know that you need to make time to worship. Wise men know that Jesus is worthy of our excitement and our emotions. Wise men know that Jesus is worthy of our church. Wise men know that he is worth looking forward to. Wise men know that Jesus is worthy of worship. That's what wise men do. Wise men worship. But I know you may not want to take my word for it. I'm just up here as a preacher saying that wise men worship. But I want you to see, as Matthew is pushing this up from the text, he's trying to help us see this. And he's exposing and he's highlighting the response of these wise men by juxtaposing and contrasting it against the king, King Herod, but also the religious elite of that time. And so as we see what these wise men do, how they respond to the news that Jesus has been born, it is contrasted against how King Herod responds, and it is contrasted against how the religious elite of that time respond. It is the dilemma and the tension of this text. The wise men are excited, and they're enthralled with the possibility of worshiping the Christ, the King. But upon hearing about the birth of the king, jealousy rises up in King Herod because he senses his kingdom and his comfort and his convenience and his crown is at risk. And so instead of catching the excitement, it incites envy in King Herod. It says that when King Herod heard about this, he was troubled. But it's not just King Herod that was troubled by it, but it also says that all of Jerusalem with him were troubled by it. See, Herod, he assembles the religious elite and he asks them, he says, can you tell me, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And so he assembles the religious elite to find out from them where was Christ to be born. And they say, listen, our Old Testament scriptures, our Hebrew text, they tell us that Jesus was to be born in the place that you would least expect the king to be born. Yeah. In Bethlehem, the place that was forgotten, the place that people thought was least. But that's where Jesus was born. But it's baffling to me that not once did they doubt that Jesus was born. They didn't say, y'all kings, y'all crazy. Get out of here. Ain't no king been born. They don't send them away and say, y'all crazy. They don't doubt that Jesus has been born. Not once did they doubt. Rather, with Herod's instruction, they even told Herod where the Christ was to be born. And it just strikes me as odd that the people who should have been most excited about the birth of Jesus were least enthused about the birth of Jesus. The people who should have been shouting from the rooftop that our Messiah, our Christ is born, were the people who were most apathetic about it. Wow. See, while the wise men were filled with excitement to worship Jesus, Herod was filled up with envy to execute Jesus. But the religious elite, they were completely indifferent. Wow. They were apathetic to the reality that the king had been born. They don't say you're crazy for thinking he's been born. They send them on their way to find out whether or not he's been born. They are apathetic and indifferent. Perhaps they even knew where the king was to be born. They knew where to look to see if the king had been born. But they don't follow the wise men. They stay in their comfort in Jerusalem. Apathetic, unconcerned, and indifferent. Instead of being excited, they are dull and unmoved. And here's the caution of this text, and the caution of this Christmas, is that we don't respond in apathy to the good news that Jesus is born. If you don't hear anything else I say today, I want you to hear this, that we are not to respond in apathy, indifference, in a dull way to the good news that Jesus was born. Because like the religious elite of the first Christmas, we mustn't be unmoved about the fact that the Christ, King, our Savior, has been born. There's a story about a teenager who was outside. He was playing basketball in his driveway, and while he's playing basketball in his driveway, he lost one of his contact lenses on the cement. He started looking all over the ground trying to find his contact lens, but he still couldn't find it anywhere after taking a whole lot of time looking for it. Somewhat afraid of his mother, he sheepishly went inside and he told his mother that he had lost his contact lens. And so she went outside to help him look for it. In less than 2 minutes, she found the contact lens. Y'all, contact lenses are hard to find. But it took his mother just 2 minutes to find what he had been looking all over for a very long time. So the teenage boy asked his mother, he said, "Mom, how is it that you were able to find this contact lens so easily?" And she said, "Son, it's real simple. We weren't looking for the same thing. You were looking for a piece of plastic. I was looking for $150. See, how we look for something and even how we respond to something, it all depends on the value we associate and place on it. And some respond to the good news that Jesus has been born with excitement because they know how good it is. They know how valuable it is. But others, they don't hardly look for it. They can't see it because they don't place any value in it. I want to know, do you see the value that the good news of Jesus Christ has been born to us on this day? Do you hear that as good news? Do you see it as valuable? See, others reject Jesus because he threatens our livelihood. Folks reject Jesus because he threatens our personal kingdom. He threatens our comfort. He threatens our convenience. Others are unmoved by the notion that Jesus was born, indifferent to it. They don't discount it. They say, yes, I believe that Jesus was born, and they can tell you all about the story. They can tell you the reason for the season, but they're not moved to worship Jesus. But this Christmas, I want us to remember that Jesus Christ is still worthy of worship. Remember, Jesus is worthy of our time and our effort. This Christmas is even worth looking forward to because of the joy it brings. This Christmas, we need to remember how valuable it is that Jesus Christ came. What he did for us, what he paid for us, we could never pay ourselves. We owed a debt for a penalty that was coming to us. And Jesus took it all on so that God's judgment, God's justice, God's wrath would be satisfied. And that is good news. You can never pay what Jesus paid in order to be right with God. And so this Christmas, we need to know and remember that Jesus is worthy of worship. Matter of fact, the idea that just flows through and captures this whole portion of Scripture is the word worship. It says in verse number 2 that the wise men came and they said, "For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." But then King Herod, he says it, but he says it in a different way. He says, I want y'all to go find out where he is, that I may come and worship him, even though that's not what he really came to do. But here's the thing, is that Matthew wants us to know that the proper response is worship. And then when they finally do get to the house where they saw the child in verse number 11 with Mary, his mother, they fell down and worshiped him. It's the idea that arrests and captures this whole text. I know the conditions may not be right this year. I know that you may have experienced loss this year. Maybe you even experienced loss of a loved one. And I know that this has been one pandemic of a year. I know the conditions may not be right. I know you've had trials and I know you've had tests. But this Christmas, let's respond as these wise men did. Let's follow the star to the place where Jesus was born, and we experience the excitement of the very first Christmas so that we too can worship Jesus this year. Because what this passage also helps us to remember is not only do we need to worship Jesus, but it also helps us to remember that God can and still does perform miracles. God is still in the business of doing the miraculous today. Why do I say that? Because y'all know it's kind of strange that they saw a star and it led them to the house where Jesus was staying. I know y'all heard it all the time, so y'all just believe it, but a lot of people throw this account out of the Bible because they say that this is never possible. How could a star actually move and lead them to Jesus? Well, here's the thing, is that God is still doing the impossible. God does the miraculous, and God even used a star to move in order to direct them to Jesus. Some believe that the star that these wise men saw that made them set out first to Jerusalem before they go to Bethlehem, they believe that it was the astrological phenomenon called the Christmas star. It's actually going to happen again on December 21st this year. I want y'all to prepare yourself on December 21st in the evening. Lord willing, we don't have clouds in the sky. We'll be able to see this astrological phenomenon. What happens is that the two largest planets in our solar system, Jupiter and Saturn, they come together so close and they're aligned so close that they form what looks like to be a double planet that shines bright. The last time it happened was 800 years ago. So it doesn't happen very often at all. And we're going to be able to see it December 21st, Lord willing. You go outside, let's look and see if we see the star. And so some people believe that this is what they saw back then. But we have no way of actually proving it. But we do know whether it happened this way or it happened another way. We do know that God can align the stars and the planets in order to bring about his plans for our life. Yes, God is the one that Psalm 8 tells us that the moon, he sets the moon and stars in place. And according to the 147th Psalm, he is the one who determines the number of stars and gives them all their names. See, even this star that guided these wise men to the place of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem is a reminder that God is still up to the miraculous. God is still moving mountains. God is still causing walls to fall. And with his power, he performs miracles. Here it is, because there is nothing that's impossible for our God. And even this star that guided these wise men, it lets us know that God, in a miraculous way, can still lead and guide us as well. And not only is he up to miracles, but he also can use things to lead and guide us miraculously. Not only can he lead and guide us miraculously, but Just as God, at the end of this passage, it says that these wise men were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, the same way God can lead and guide us to avoid things that will take us out. God will keep us from dangers seen and unseen. Y'all, God, he reveals himself in a dream to astrological studying wise, weird men from the east. So, of course, he can guide and keep us. Just like he allowed them to depart another way, he can guide and keep us from dangers. He can guide and keep us from stuff that's going to take us out. In fact, here it is. God can change the trajectory of your life this Christmas if you'll just worship him. If you'll come to the feet of Jesus and worship Jesus, God can change the trajectory of your life. We used to sing this song growing up. He is always looking out for me. He's always busy opening up doors that I can't even see. And I don't have to worry because he takes good care of me. Oh, it is Jesus. And he is looking out for me. But I want you to see how these wise men responded. It says in verse number 10 that when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. See, one of the things that we have to do is we've got to rejoice. We need to have joy in our soul because Jesus has come into our life. That's reason to praise him. That's reason to rejoice. That's reason to have joy. Even though my situation doesn't feel happy, I've got joy down in my heart because Jesus is in my heart. And so right now in this season, we can still rejoice. We can still have joy. But also, it says in verse number 11 that going into the house, they saw the child. And when they saw the child with Mary, his mother, they fell down and worshiped him. Y'all, we've got to spend some time worshiping Jesus this season. Yeah, we say it every Christmas season, but this season, I think that the remedy for the malaise that we have as we approach this season is that we need to worship Jesus. Because we do have reason to worship. But also, when they saw Jesus, they opened up their treasures and they offered him gifts. What might you offer Jesus this season? What is befitting for a king? Perhaps you can give him your life. You can say, Jesus, I don't want to be in control of my life anymore. I'm going to give it to you. I know that you died in order to give me new life. And so now I lay everything down to follow you. Perhaps you say, you know what? God's been good to me this year. I'm going to give an extra offering this year. Or perhaps you can say, you know what? There's some more slots left for Angel Tree. I'll buy something in order to bless somebody who is not as well off. Yeah. What might you offer this season? We are reminded this Christmas that we have reason to rejoice. We are reminded this Christmas that we have reason to bring gifts fitting for a king. But we're also reminded this Christmas that we have reason to worship. I want to say this again. What this passage provides for us isn't so much lessons from Christmas, but it provides for us the remedy for the malaise that we are feeling about this Christmas season. And the remedy for this Christmas is being reminded of the good news that Christ has been born. Y'all, that's reason to worship. Somebody's been struggling and you've been allowing the test and the trials and the loss and the devastation and the uncertainty and the tragedy of this year to steal your joy. But this joy I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it away. This joy I have, I can worship even when things around me are not like I would want it to be. Because I know that I have the good news. Somebody needs to get back to worship. I wonder if there's anyone who's listening that you need to choose to worship this Christmas season. We haven't been able to worship together corporately as a church since March, but you need to take some time to worship Jesus this Christmas season. I know you know what the real meaning of Christmas is, but will you reflect on this good news and be moved by it, moved to worship? I'm not talking about emotionalism. I'm talking about in our emotions to respond to what God has done. See, emotionalism is responding to something that nothing has happened and you just doing it out of emotionalism. But when you have your emotions stirred because of what Jesus has done, you respond. Don't let the loss and the turmoil and the difficulties you've experienced this year snuff out your worship. I promise you that if you'll worship, this Christmas will be a very special Christmas if you'll worship.